Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the big discussion on portals and the removal of convenience. Mainly this video is actually touching on the portals, although I am going to show you what's happening with the portals, but more about the communication that's coming from Blizzard and, of course, the timing of things, which hasn't been great. Communication's been a big problem for Blizzard for the last, 4 years. They've really decided to close their doors on communicating with the players about their intentions, and also a lot of their justifications for things that just don't seem to make any sense, right? They don't make any sense because their justifications, when they do actually communicate with us, just don't hold water. Like, they don't, in the eyes of people who know a lot about the subject they're talking about, it just doesn't make sense. It might make sense to a lot of less educated players who just play for a little bit of fun, but for those players who experience these things on a daily basis, they don't make sense. So good examples would be the random change to the Mythic Plus cache that was never announced, AK capping that was never announced, all these big changes that happened to the game that they just never told us about, just various blunders that are certainly in BFA, which have led to a lot of distrust amongst the player base for what Blizzard's actually saying. Personal loot and master loot are another one. Like, we couldn't find any evidence of this widespread abuse that was going on. I looked high and low. It just didn't exist. Wherever the information was coming from, it wasn't accessible by players in order to go, yeah, they're right. This is a big problem. Which helps when Blizzard's making decisions like these. And if you've not been keeping up with a lot of World of Warcraft stuff, then you might not be aware that very recently they removed a lot of portals from the game, a while ago now, a few months ago, without replacing them in any way, leaving a lot of people to go like, what the fuck? Why? Why are you doing this? Now, they did say they're bringing in a portal room, and the portal room is coming next week. And we have been able to look at the portal room for a while. I have shown it off before, but the full effect of it is only really hitting the player base as the date approaches, which is pretty normal. It's like, as closer and closer things get, it's like, okay, this is a big problem now. And Blizzard has acknowledged it by saying, yeah, we're aware of the 5,000 plus posts you guys have put out in protest to this change, and tough luck, it's staying as it is, and almost trying to play it off. They did have a blue responder who's trying to play it off like, what's really the problem here? Is it a big deal? So let me show you what's going on. So this is live. Okay, this is live. Now I'm going to buff myself so you don't have that flashing buff thing, but on the PTR, when I come over to here, I'm going to leave it on. So for the most part, not only am I a Zandalari troll, as you can see here, but I'll also have the flashing buff, and you'll also register it's the PTR by this icon in the top left here, so you'll know which game I'm currently playing. So I have both of them open right now. This is live. None of the information is there. This is PTR. So I'm in Dalaran, Legion Dalaran. Now, this is a big transport hub for many, many players. Whether it's you're farming some old mounts, old reputations, whether you're doing any transmog runs, things like that, Dalaran Legion is a big central hub, mainly because of its usability of portals. So this is the live one, as you can see. Got plenty of portals here, accessing various areas. And also, if we come up here, you'll have to bear with me, but it's kind of ironic. I'm going to have to do a little bit of traveling in order to highlight some of this stuff. If we come down into the Chamber of the Guardian, in the portrait room, for those of you who remember this or use this on a regular basis, this will all be familiar to you, but I think for the sake of contrast, we're going to show it off here. There's a number of portals down below here that take us to some very convenient locations. So we have the portal to Karazhan, a portal to Dalaran Crater, which is great for getting to Arathi and whatnot, Wormrest Temple in Wrath of the Lich King, to Shatrath in the Burning Crusade, and of course the Caverns of Time, which is somewhere a lot of people want to go, farming Mount Hyjal, things like that. All important places that players want a convenient route to get to, because ordinarily they're not convenient to get to, and they're in a world that is essentially dead. Like, the only reason you would ever be in those areas right now is because you're leveling. Like, there's no other reason to go to those places, as I instinctively go the wrong way, which I did many, many times during my time in Legion, especially when coming out of that room. So, yeah, bear that in mind. Now, if we skip over to the PTR, it's gone. They're all gone, as you can see. There's one portal to Orgrimmar, and if I do go down to... I have low flight speed on this character. Weird. Let's go down to here. One thing you're going to immediately notice, in fact, they're not even going to load in because they should have already loaded in by now, is that those portals are removed. So a lot of these portals that people found very convenient for these central hubs are now gone. They have been removed. Now, I've put a list below. Wowhead's got a good list of every portal that has been removed. But I'll run through them now. So for Legion Dalaran, which is where we are right now, Ironforge and Thunderbluff is gone, Darnassus and Undercity is gone, Caverns of Time is gone, Dalaran Crater is gone, Karazhan is gone, Exodar and Silvermoon is gone, Shatrath is gone, Wormrest Temple is gone, Vale of the Eternal Blossoms is gone. In Mists of Pandaria at the Shrine, Shatrath and Dalaran Northrend have been removed. In Dalaran Northrend, the Caverns of Time has been removed. And in Stormwind and Orgrimmar, it does say Hellfire Peninsula has been removed. However, that's not technically true. There is a NPC that will teleport you there if you're leveling. So that's what's going on. So I'll show you that guy shortly. Oh, I just buffed myself. I didn't want to. It's instinctive because of the buff thing. Okay, let's go to the Portal Room then and see what they're replacing it with. So now all these places contain a portal to Orgrimmar. And here is the Portal Room. This is the brand new Portal Room we're getting. And where is it? Most importantly, let's show you. This is why I'm on my mage. I have some good movement and I can port us around very easily. But you'll notice that is the entrance to Orgrimmar. As you well know it, this is the outside of Orgrimmar where you have all the dueling and whatnot. So now when you come in here, there is a doorway that takes you down to the Portal Room. And the reason they've built this is to consolidate the portals. The Cataclysm portals that take you to the various zones are still there over in this sort of area. But everything else is now here. Now, first and foremost, I agree with this change. I do agree with this change. If I jump back to live and I go to Orgrimmar, I think it is absolutely correct of Blizzard to say that what they currently have set up in the Cleft of Shadow right here is a mess. This looks like a fucking joke. It looks like a child made it. We got Blasted Lands portals, portals to Dalaran, portals to Hellfire Peninsula. Dalaran is just Ashran, you know, the usual stuff. But it's confusing. It looks a mess. It looks like a kid made it. I agree. I think that's a mess. And I think from a visual standpoint and from a gaming standpoint, this is far superior. We're back on the PTR now. Now, I notice there's a lot of NPCs they've put in here to try and make this space feel fuller. We've talked about this a lot. With less and less players in the game and the increasing amount of phasing and sharding, they decided that the best way of making areas feel like they're full of life is actually to fill it with NPCs doing stuff. So you can see these guys come out of portals. You can also occasionally see characters run down and go into portals. But that's generally what's going on. This Thralmar mage here. Let's go through the portals you get then. So in the Portal Room, at least in the Horde one, you're going to get Silvermoon City. You're going to get Shatrath City for the Burning Crusade. You're going to get Ashran. You're going to get Azuna for Legion. You're going to get Zuldazar. You're going to get Honeydew Village for Mists of Pandaria. No longer takes you to the Shrine. And Dalaran Crystal Song Forest for Wrath of the Lich King. Now, there's obviously a lot of questions probably being raised by now for people who aren't aware of this, although I think many of you actually are, is why, in a lot of cases, have they decided to make these skewed movements for some reason. So, if we wanted to go to Legion, for example, we would have to take this portal to Azuna, which no longer takes us to Dalaran. Instead, it's going to take us to that awkward spot where we turned in emissaries if you played Legion, down here in Azuna. So it's also not got a flight point. Like, this triggered me to no end. I've often whistled from this location because I can't be bothered to go down to the Illidari Strand to take the flight point. But you can actually see Dalaran is just over there, which is very frustrating. Very, very frustrating. Now, I've just shown you Dalaran. There is a portal there, but it is straight back to Orgrimmar, as there is one here, as you can see. And that'll be the Stormwind one. So this takes us straight back to the Portal Room. So why, and there's a big question a lot of people asking, why the hell have you made it just less convenient? And the same could go for Honeydew Village. So if we wanted to go to Mists of Pandaria, where ordinarily we would go to the Shrine, instead, now it drops you in the middle of the Jade Forest. There you go. You see, it drops us here. Instead of here, which was the central location that we used to go to. Again, all that remains there is actually a portal to Orgrimmar, the exact same that is here. So it's dropped us here. Now, that's just less convenient. Now, some guys have done the math on this. Overall, it adds like 3, 4, 5 minutes depending on the portal. Some of them are more convenient. Some of them are just less convenient, like this one. Depending on where you want to go, it just adds minutes to your gameplay, which has obviously just upset a lot of people because it comes across that Blizzard's just increasing your active playtime in the most arbitrary fashion possible. Now, I don't think that's overly fair, while I'm not defending this system, more importantly, these I don't mind too much. They're a little frustrating, but I think some of it is like simple labeling purposes. Like having 2 dalarans in here is probably something they really didn't want, is to have 2 dalarans. Despite the fact that you could port immediately back to the portal room and take the right one, that's an extra 2 loading screens they probably didn't want people to go through, and therefore they decided to make it as convenient as possible, but still ultimately less convenient by having a Xuna. However, that argument does not stand up for the Mr. Pandaria one. Why are they making this change then? We have had a response from Blizzard. Well, you're not going to like it for the most part. The reason is, one, it funnels everybody into this area, kind of like it already did, but instead of people being spread throughout the various cities, whichever city they felt most convenient with, usually it would have been Dalaran Legion, now it funnels everybody into Orgrimmar to start accessing the rest of the world. So it should make this area feel more lifelike and fuller. And in fact, if I go to Dalaran on live, if I use my Dalaran Hearthstone, I could teleport, but this is faster. It's actually full of people, because it's full of people who are all using the gateways that are there, because it's very convenient to have your Dalaran Hearthstone take you to Legion, and then have jump-off points to so many... Look how full of life this is, right? Look how full of life this is. Now, there's several people here who are leveling or have no reason to level 120, which is obviously an issue of BFA. I have the same issue, as I have no compulsion to level a lot of my characters right now. But it is also the staging point to jump off into so many places, because you have all these portals up here and all the portals down there. And remember, 100% of those portals have gone, as well as 5 out of 6 of these portals. I believe there's 6. So, obviously this has upset a lot of people, particularly when it comes to the less convenient ones, like Karazhan, Caverns of Time, things like that. Now, it must be pointed out here that there are other ways of traveling to those places. I did show you then, the Dalaran Hearthstone does still exist and does still work. The ring that takes you to Karazhan still works, right? All this stuff will still work. What they've removed is the active portals. You can see I'm now in Karazhan. This, again, once again, is the PTR. And my Dalaran Hearthstone still works to get back to those places. So there are items in the game... Sorry about the cough. There are items in the game that still will transport you to these places. A great number of them. Mage or not, nothing I've done here has been mage stuff. This has all been other things that people have access to. The problem, of course, as rightly pointed out, is not every character of every player's account has access to these things. Some of these things are locked off until you complete certain content, and if you're just after transmog or whatever, or multiple characters to farm mounts on, expecting various grinds to take place in order to accommodate this seemingly needless change is very frustrating. Very, very frustrating. I will point out here for clarity that the portals that you have right now in your current cities, so in Zuldazar or Borealis, will remain. They're staying the same, so including the Silithus one. Now, as I said, some people have worked it out. There are a lot of places that... There are a lot of ways of getting to the same places that you would ordinarily go to, even if you haven't got these convenience items, right? You can still get to the Caverns of Time relatively easily by going Orgrimmar, then taking the portal to Uldum, and then flying up, should you not want to take the... Or if you haven't got something like an engineering portal or something like that. There are ways and means around it. The question is, why are Blizzard doing something that the player base has so vividly and rigorously said, we do not want? We do not want this. So Blizzard's response is that there are just too many portals in the world. It's too convenient. And it makes the world feel smaller. That's a fair argument if you put it into its own little box and tidy it up and put a ribbon around it. Unfortunately, though, this world, this ginormous, enormous world that contains 3 essentially planets at this point is dead, besides these 2 islands. It is utterly and completely dead. And there is no reason other than arbitrary change in order to change this system up, because I don't want to spend a lot of time flying over Northrend. I don't want to spend a lot of time flying over Kalimdor, and I certainly don't want to do that when I've had a convenient option for, in some cases, over a decade. Over 10 years, this hasn't been an issue for players. And it reminds me, it's like recently on the Allcraft show, it was a narrative that both me and Asmon agreed on, is that a lot of changes that happen to the game and have been happening for a long time seemingly are made with developer ideas in mind and not the players. Like, from a developer standpoint, they find it annoying that there's a lot of portals and people are just whizzing around everywhere. From a player standpoint, that's not our problem. And there are plenty of games that use portals and things like that far more excessively than WoW does, and the players are fine with it. Absolutely fine with it. So they're trying to suggest, or the narrative they're pushing forward, is that this will increase social interaction. Now, that's the only way I can see that working, by funneling everyone through either Orgrimmar or Stormwind, because as you've seen, there's no Thunderbluff or anything here, is if I come into the portal room and I go, hey guys, where's everyone off to today? Right? Everyone off to today. Like, is this what Blizzard thinks happening? You know, is this... it doesn't make sense. People are going to run into this room. I will see visually probably a lot more players in this area, but before it gets phased out. But I'm just going to instantly port to wherever I want to be, should I be using this on my other characters. And it just... yeah, there's activity here, but as you can see, a lot of it is NPC activity. Yeah? There's more NPCs here by... there's double the amount of NPCs here than there are players. Like, yes, this is the PTR, but you get the idea. A lot of the activity here isn't players at all. It doesn't create a more social environment in any way, shape, or form. Does it make the world feel bigger? I mean, objectively, yes. But it also comes with inconvenience, tediousness. If I want to, let's say I want to transmog in the Heart of Fear, right? So I want to go to Pandaria and I want to go to the Dread Waste. So if I wanted to do that ordinarily, let's do what I would ordinarily do if this was live. I would take the portal to the Vale of the Eternal Blossoms, right? Which is what most of you would do right now if you're going to go transmog in the Heart of Fear. Let's use this as a reasonable example of what we might do. I would take the portal to the Vale. I would hopefully load in once it figures out that I'm in Pandaria. I would appear, and then I would probably take a flight point over to where I wanted to be, right? Somewhere pretty close. And then I would just fly on my mount to get there. Okay, fine. That seems pretty good. No problems at all. When the new patch comes out, though, what is the difference in terms of what Blizzard says they're trying to achieve? Well, I obviously wouldn't be here because the portal no longer takes me here. Instead, as you can see, all these portals are removed. If we go to Orgrimmar, it's going to take us, obviously, back to the portal room. Instead, I'm just going to go to Honeydew Village now instead. And do exactly the same thing. But it's going to take me longer. Yeah? It's going to take me longer. I'm just going to come up to the flight point here. Click it. And I'm just going to have to fly this extra distance. Which adds about a minute or something. Why? Like, what's wrong with the city? And I think this is a fair and justifiable question. Like, what's wrong with the central city of the expansion? And people are right to ask this question. A lot of people, it's one of those things where some people are like, is it really that big of a deal? An extra 1 or 2 minutes flight point? It is when there's no real justification behind it. Like, what's the point? What's wrong with how it was since Mr. Pandaria came out so many expansions ago? Why is it a problem now? Why does it have to take me to the village instead? Like, it doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. Is it easier for somebody? Because we're not seeing that, really. It doesn't add up. And this is a fair and logical question. You just increased my playtime. And there are obviously more egregious examples than that. A lot more egregious examples of that. Some things are more convenient. Some things aren't. It's really that simple question. But again, it comes back down to communication. We have a situation here which isn't a big deal. I'm not going to pretend it is. It's not that big of a deal. But it's still a thing that, in an expansion which is not being received well anyway, it's being taken as like, why? You just seem to be inconvenienced players. I'm sure this is better for you as developers. And again, they've said this room could be expanded. They could rearrange this room at a whim to add more portals into it and just expand it out and make it grow. But from a player standpoint, it's nothing we asked for. So many thousands of players have expressed their dislike of this change because it does make several things that people like to do on a week-by-week basis just less convenient. And I do sympathize with the guys who are like, well, I farmed this mount. I went out and I timed this. I farmed this mount on multiple characters. if I don't get that to drop because it's pure RNG over the next sort of like 12 months, you've added days of playtime at that point because of this change. These 1 or 2 minutes that you're adding to each of these things that we've had for a decade now are now adding days and days of completely arbitrary playtime to what I'm doing. And is that what you want? Which is the right question. Is that the purpose behind this? Because people are skeptical because of this distrust about Blizzard's motivations. Blizzard's motivations might actually be fine. That's why they might have been playful. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah, okay, we've removed less static portals that are for every character, but this maybe makes mage portals more desirable again. This makes collecting items like the Vial, the Grand Magus Ring, more desirable. This is more options for you to do. Their intentions might be purely fine and happy and wonderful, and they may be confused. But from a player standpoint, is you're just taking away from me again. You're taking it away from me, like you tried to do with flying, like you tried to do with water walking, like you did with my spells and abilities. You're stripping back things that I've had now for decade, right? And people are rightfully pissed that it's happening. I don't think it's fair to look at this, again, lack of communication or disconnect between what the developers think is the right course of action and what the players are saying is, no, we don't want this. And when we do see threads that have reached thousands and thousands of posts, I think Blizzard has to step back and say, hang on a minute, are we making the right decision here? Like, people really dislike this change. Yeah, we're only adding a couple of minutes here and there. Assuming their intentions are all good, we're only adding a couple of minutes and we get this cool new room. Like, is it really that big of a deal? Well, yeah, thousands of players are saying you with facts. Like I say, the people are drawing up the numbers here, saying, yeah, this is actually a really big deal for me. And I don't see the point in it. I don't see the point in it. You're telling me this will make the world feel bigger. It just makes it more tedious in my eyes because there is genuinely no other reason to visit these areas. Now, if Blizzard were to say, look, we're doing this now and we are aware right now, yeah, sure. There's no reason to go to Northrend. There's no reason to go to most of the Eastern Kingdoms unless you're after very specific things from old game. The things that we drop in islands, which make you go to like Booty Bay and things, yeah, they're not ideal. The Wormrest Temple one, not ideal. They're not really something I would consider. I know personally, and some of you might feel differently about this, but I know personally if I get an item to go to Booty Bay, certainly on my Druid or something like that, I'm not going. I'm not doing it. It just takes way too long. I'm not doing it. I'm not traveling all that way down. And the only reason I would even consider doing it is because it added a quest to my quest log, which irritates me because on my live characters, I don't have quests in my quest log. Like, everything is done. You see? I've got, like, this that I'm saving on my mage, and my druid has absolutely nothing. And I'm just saving this to get the AP at a later date. That's all. When it comes to actually my main character, I don't have anything in my quest log. And having this thing go and drop it off annoys me. I would rather delete it, in all honesty, than fly down to fucking Booty Bay and spend all that time getting there. I can't be bothered. It takes too long. The world is huge, and going there for that one tiny bit of AP just isn't worth my time. It's not worth my time. And that's what other players are saying. That's their argument. It's like, it's not worth my time to add potentially days of arbitrary gameplay to my experience for something that I've been doing for the last couple of years, 2 years, 6 months, 5 years, 6 years, that was perfectly acceptable then. Now you're telling me it's no longer acceptable unless I jump through all these little extra hoops. And frankly, I can't be arsed. The stuff I'm doing isn't that interesting in the first place. It's something I kind of enjoy doing, going and chasing, if whatever it is, a rare mount, some sort of killing a rare, getting Thunder Fury, getting fucking old transmog. That's stuff I do because I find it kind of fun. It's relatively convenient to do, and that's fine. And now you're making it worse? Like, I'm just not interested anymore, and I will quit the game over this. And that's a legitimate argument. As much as people go, you're being ridiculous. It's only like an extra minute or two. Actually, for a lot of players, if they're doing it with like several characters, which most people have right now, that extra couple of minutes adds up to an extra 20 minutes, half an hour, on top of what they were already doing. Then they might multiply that by like every week. So within a month, you've added an extra 2 hours of just what? Flying around? Loading screens? It's a fair argument to say, you know what, I'm not into it. I'm just not going to do it. Because it was fine before and you've changed it now. And I don't really like the argument you're putting forward. It doesn't feel genuine to me, which is an understandable concept because The world feeling bigger? I mean, yeah, but in all the wrong ways. Like, that's the argument, is like in all the wrong ways. Well, if Blizzard were to say, we're looking to really invigorate the old world, okay, maybe we've got a discussion going along the way. Because you start adding 2 or 3 things to do down in these old places. All right, now we've got ourselves something we could talk about. There's some activity going on down in the Cave of Stranglethorn. There's something happening here that's relevant to me, instead of this being a dead, empty, lifeless world that I'm flying over the top of and just seeing trees, the top of trees. That's all I'm seeing. Like, that's not a good argument. But tell me that overall we're going to be improving the old world in some way. All right, now we've got ourselves a fucking game, and now I'm a bit more interested. But we're not there yet. All we're seeing from a player standpoint is the removal of options. And the removal of options has been a theme throughout BFA. Adding more to them, not a big deal. I will say to the guys arguing, is like, why are you focusing on this instead of doing other bug fixing things? It's usually a totally separate team that's doing content like this. I don't know 100% that it is, but usually it is. It's a totally separate team doing content like this than would be doing like class balancing and stuff like that. So that's not really a relevant argument most of the time. And I'm assuming that's the case here. But I just thought I'd bring this to your forefront. It's, again, for me, this is just communication. Again, like, the communication just doesn't add up. And it doesn't make sense. I'm not seeing... This is the reality. What we're seeing right in front of us is people just run past, go through the portal, and they're gone again. This isn't increasing social interaction. It's not making the world feel bigger in the right way. Right? I think that's a noble goal, is to make the world feel bigger. And also the argument that it used to be this way. Remember Classic, where we only have mage portals of 40% mounts? That isn't the game anymore. That was 12 years, 13 years ago. Like, the game has moved on since then, and people have had access to these options for a really long time. And to try and be smugly sit there and say, well, back in my day, we used a horse and cart, and we had square wheels or whatever. Like, no one fucking cares, dude. Get over it. Classic's coming if that's something you really crave, but it doesn't diminish the arguments of the guys who have had relatively easy convenience for like 10 plus years, including myself. Like, yeah, sure, one of my characters is a mage. And I don't struggle with convenience, really, when traveling around. It's one of the big pluses of playing a mage. And I can't say I'm overly thrilled about people hassling me about making portals again. I can't say I'm really excited about that. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share on this subject. Overall, I disagree with this decision. I don't think the benefits outweigh the cons. I see the benefits. I understand some of them. I do. I genuinely do see some of the benefits. I see some noble ideas. But the ultimate reaction is the game just doesn't back up the purpose behind it. Like, the game's not there. Making the world feel bigger is a noble goal, but the world doesn't feel bigger when you do this kind of change. And the communication, when you're seeing so many people being pissed off at you, saying this is just irritating, I think you have to bear that in mind with feedback. I think you have to say, maybe we need to rethink this plan, instead of posting like, well, you know, tough shit, essentially. This is the way it's going to be because we've decided. Because that just makes the players who are already in a bad mood go, this is classic. This is classic Blizzard right now. It's like they see a giant post of people who are not happy and they just say, tough shit, this is how we want it to be. Are these decisions being made because the developers find it more convenient? Or is it in the interests of players? Because if it's in the interests of players, I'm not really seeing it, unfortunately. Thank you so much for listening, guys. I'll see you again. Bye-bye.